Good morning. Welcome everybody to the presentation of the second quarter results of Photon Energy NV. Welcome to this format, which we're now using for the second time, and which we also intend to use for the presentation of all our quarterly results going forward. I'm here today with Clemens Vollmuth, our CFO, who will be running you through the first part of the presentation that will also include the financials.
Good. Hello also from my side. I will guide you through our Q2 and half-year results through the financials, and then afterwards I will hand over back to George, who will give you an outlook on strategy and our upcoming activities that we have planned. At the end, we have left some time for question and answers for questions that you can raise them. I don't want to bore you too long with also at the beginning, well, not bore you, but give you just a short wrap up of our business. For those of you who do not know us that well, Photon Energy is in the so-called downstream segment of the photovoltaic industry. So we are a developer, builder, and investor in photovoltaic power plants. So we cover the whole life cycle from the development phase, construction phase, procurement of technology. We are investing in those power plants and are asset holders. So we are producing electricity, and then we provide the long-term operations and maintenance services until the decommissioning of a power plant. We do this for commercial power plants. So for sizes, we start around 300 kilowatt going up to the biggest development was about 300 megawatts. This is our business model. From our geographies, as most of you are aware, we are mainly focused on Europe, there in Central Europe and Australia. We have our own portfolio at the moment of 60.6 megawatts, which is distributed between the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. And one small power plant in Australia, which is connected. This is the main source of our revenue generation. On top of that, we provide O&M services to more than 310 megawatts, mainly in Central Europe, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Romania, Hungary, Slovenia, but also in Australia, where we provide to 250 megawatts full O&M services, and to another 60 megawatts we provide special inverter, central inverter maintenance services. This is the second source of our revenue streams, which is a recurring revenue streams as well. The other core activity we provide is project development. There we are focusing at the moment still mainly on Australia and Hungary, where we have built also under construction quite a bit at the moment. But we also put first steps into Romania and Poland, where we are preparing our future growth. But more to that will Mr. Hota tell you afterwards. This is our geography focus. Let's go into the financials. To do so, let me first give you an overview of what basically happened in Q2 in our company. As you all know, the second quarter generally in the economy was hit still by the corona pandemic. Luckily, as already in Q1, we can also in Q2 still state that our company has not been that heavily impacted by the coronavirus. So we could continue our operation. Our electricity generation is running very well. We have generated in the first half year now about 37 gigawatt hours and up of 73% compared to the same period of last year, 2019. So we are growing. Our proprietary portfolio continued to grow. So as we already mentioned in Q1, we still connected in these turbulent times power plants. Also in Q2, we connected another 5 power plants in Mai and in Cluj and Marton, where we already had some power plants in place. So this is running still very well. Our O&M business as well could continue to grow in the first half year. And here again, considering this situation with coronavirus, in overall we could connect or could win another 37 megawatts of O&M business. Compared to the 49 megawatts of last year, we are looking very optimistic into the future that also in the second half year we will basically top this result. This is about the business activities we had in Q2. What does this mean for the financials? Our income statement came in this quarter. We had revenues of 8.88 million, an increase of 12% compared to the same quarter last year. So we're very happy about that. Main growth is coming from electricity generation, which is very important to us. This also, if you look on a half-year side, we could grow our total revenues from 12.1 million to 14.2 million, a growth of about 17%. So that is very positive for us because the growth in revenues, as I mentioned, coming mainly from electricity generation also means that the gross profit increased quite a bit because electricity generation, as you might be aware, has the highest gross profit margin in our service mix that we provide, our revenue mix. So gross profit grew as well, going down to, even though operating costs grew as well with the growing of the company as such and preparing for new markets, our EBITDA still continued to grow, and we could record a all-time high EBITDA of 4 million in Q2, which is the highest EBITDA in the history of our company in this quarter, which brings our also year-to-date figure from 4.6 million EBITDA last year to half-year 5.4 million EBITDA. So this is from operational side very positive, I think, message that we can deliver. Naturally, with the growth of our investment and building activities, depreciation, our asset base grew and our depreciation is growing. So from 2 million to 2.4 million in Q2, which leaves us with an EBIT of 1.6 million compared to 1.5 million in last year. As already mentioned in the last in the Q1 webcast which we had, our income statement has to be viewed from two angles. One from the top, basically the operating business, and one from the very bottom when we talk about the total comprehensive income, which reflects the value creation that we have done in that period as well. So I will go into this in a second, but before that, when we have talked about the operating business and the EBIT, let me explain you a little about how we still can come to a profit or respectively loss after taxation of almost 1 million, which in the first view looks quite, how to say, disturbing. To explain that, maybe there is, if you look in the details from EBIT, which was still a very positive development, we have on the one side net financial expenses that increased, income tax that increased as well. The reason for that, look here, or the figures here look a little worse than the reality is. Net financial expenses in reality increased by about 200,000 euros for interest cost, which is mainly related to our financing strategy of the refinancing with local banks, where we have drawn down long-term bank financing, plus the increase of our bond that we have done in last summer last year, so after the reporting period last year. So this is in reality about 200,000 euros, not the 600,000 euros you can see here. The remaining 400,000 euros comes from a non-cash and non-realized revaluation of derivatives of our interest hedging that we do and are obliged to do from the banks. Those are accounting losses which are not realized. Income tax as well grew quite a bit compared to last year. This is on the one side higher income tax we are having for the profitable SPVs, power plants that we have installed. Plus we have in this quarter, it looks even higher if you compare it with, or much higher than last quarter or previous quarters. But this is a quarterly, how to say, time accrual that is basically compensating also for the first quarter. So if you look in the half-year figures, it's from 740 to 980,000 for the half year, which is in line with the development of the company. but in Q2 this looks a little worse. So if you would accrue it, or if you would accrue it over the whole period, I mean, this is accruals made until the end of the year. If you take this more linear, then this figure would be smaller. So end of the day, the profit, but still in accounting, the loss after taxation looks like almost $1 million minus. This is then compensated by two major positive effects. The one which is strategically important to us, the revaluation of our assets that we bring online onto the grid, where we have connected, as I mentioned before already, another 5 power plants. This created another comprehensive income of 640,000 euros this quarter. So in total, with the 2.7 million this year, we are basically in line with last year, and we feel comfortable that we will also, until the end of the year, with the additional power plants we will connect, outperform, I think, this figure this year compared to last year as well. Last quarter, one of the biggest negative impacts we had, and by the coronavirus, was the turbulences on the financial markets. We got hit by a foreign currency translation difference quite heavily. Again, I mentioned this already last time as well. This was a non-realized and non-cash event, which is still to be accounted for in accounting. In this quarter, the financial markets recovered a little, at least, what we could see. This created a positive effect of 1.5 million. So in total, we are still in the red here in this effect. So this is still hurting or harming our results. But for the Q2, this still means that we are bottom line positive with 1.2 million euros. If you take half year figures, it's 3.1 million negative still, but the total effect, if you take out this total effect of the foreign currency translation differences of almost a little more than the same amount, if you take out the revaluation of derivatives, which I mentioned before, with the 600,000 euros, then we would 400,000 euros, sorry, then we would end up pretty much with a very nice total comprehensive income this year. So far, this is about the income statement. If we look into the balance sheet, here as well, the fixed assets grew. This is mainly due to the newly connected power plants, as I mentioned before, reduced by some depreciation naturally in this quarter. Plus, we also have a positive effect by the currencies from the Czech crown and the Hungarian forint there in the total values. In the current assets, the main change, those increased as well from 21 to 30.5 million, roughly by 44%. This is mainly due to the drawdowns we had from the long-term bank financing on the projects we connected in the first half year and end of the day Q2 as well. So we increased our cash position from 9.7 million end of Q1 to 16.9 million Q2. Also, this is helping us, and we feel very comfortable for the future, for the activities which Mr. Hotter will mention then afterwards about what we are right now doing and planning to do in the upcoming months and quarters. Equity increased as well slightly due to the positive result from 33.5 to 34.6 or 34.7 million by 3.5%. Non-current liabilities increased, as you can see, mainly due to the bank loans from the long-term non-recourse financing on the project level that we have done in Hungary, which brings us to a total balance sheet of about 139 million. Our adjusted equity ratio, which is especially interesting for our bondholders, remained sound at 28.5%. As you know, we have 25% as a governance given to our bondholders that we want to keep in any case. I mentioned already the cash position that grew from 9.7 million to 16.9 million. How did this happen? Mainly a positive operating cash flow of 3.1 million. We invested overall 3.7 million in building additional power plants. Plus, we announced, I think already after we published the Q1 figures that we have invested into a strategic partnership with RAYGEN in Australia. This is also reflected here, this minority investment into this company. So this is the investing activities. Financing-wise, we have drawn down, as mentioned, in Hungary, about 10.2 million, pretty much the same amount as last year for the same time when we connected more or less the same number of power plants. We did some repayments of borrowings, 1.3 million of those bank financings as in plan with the repayments. And the interest payment, as I mentioned before, here you can see this difference that in reality our financial costs increased by some 160,000 euros from 1.09 million to 1,250. That's the real interest cost that we had to pay to the banks and to our bondholders. So total net change in cash 7.2 million positive. This is about the financials. For sure, you will have some questions. We can answer them afterwards. And let me now hand over to Mr. Hota to give you a view on our strategy and the outlook.
Okay, thank you very much, Clemens. So I will start with our goals as we have been communicating them in the past. I will repeat once again, as also mentioned last time, we are very conservative in how we present and communicate and report our pipeline. So we only report projects that are at a very advanced stage. So of course, in the background, the pipeline of projects that we are working on and that are at various stages of development, we do not report. This is a practice which we may reconsider going forward, as some of our peers take a slightly different approach. So maybe to make our pipeline more comparable to that of our peers. We are reviewing the pros and cons of this approach as we speak. Of course, at the moment, as we have filed a prospectus for the listing to the main markets in Prague and Warsaw, we have to be very careful with forward-looking statements. But once we're listed, we will review our policy with respect to our pipeline, but probably also to forward-looking statements more generally. So what you see here are projects or power plants that are already connected and capacity of projects that are either under construction or at a very advanced stage of development. So the goal that we have for the end of year 2020 is, at the moment, we have 2 sites that are under construction, which is 14.1 megawatts in Hungary, in Puspokladany, where we're building 10 separate power plants, but in one location, and 2 power plants with a total installed capacity of 14.6 megawatts. So that should take us close to 90 megawatts at the end of this year. So that will be added to the 15 we have historically in the Czech Republic, the 10.4 in Slovakia. And in Hungary, this will take us to just shy of 50 megawatts. We have in the past communicated a goal of 75 for the end of next year. And what we have announced recently is that we have a pipeline of what will be approximately 28.5 megawatts of installed capacity in the region of Tolna. But for the purposes of this presentation, we are sticking to our 75 megawatt target. Those 28.5 will take us slightly above. Needless to say, we are developing other projects and trying to acquire other projects in the Hungarian markets. We are also stepping up our development efforts in Poland and Romania, which we also view as very interesting markets for utility scale projects. We are continuing with the development of our projects in Australia, where, as those following our company for quite some time, we have already exited 2 projects that have reached a stage where we sold them, or our interest in the projects, to Canadian Solar. Progress is being made on all the other projects, so we will see how and when an exit, further exit could be structured. One area that we will be that we're exploring ever more closely is, in addition to utility scale projects, that means projects that feed the electricity into the grid, is the potential of projects for commercial off-takers that are built behind the meter. That means where the electricity is used, is produced and used in the same spot behind the grid connection point. So this is mainly relevant for industrial and also larger commercial users. And the slightly problematic issue is that these are very dependent. These type of projects are very dependent on the regulatory framework, that means the energy law, but also the tax regulation, and some other aspects, like, for example, the cost of CO2 certificates for some of the off-takers. So the actual business model and approach has to be tailored for each market separately, and this is what we're working on in Hungary, Poland, and Romania. So the 3 markets where we're also developing utility scale projects. And of course, we are still very busy in trying to expand our customer base and number of megawatts that we provide operations maintenance services to. Of course, we're taking care of our own power plants, but we see some very good traction with investors, both local and international, in the markets where we are present at the moment, and Hungary being the most dynamic at this point. Oops, sorry. Yep, the wrong slide. So I think I've touched upon most of this already. So push planning under construction. The expected grid connection is in the 4th quarter of this year. So we expect all 10 power plants to be connected and already producing electricity in Q4. Tolna is under development, so there we expect the ready to build stage by the end of the year. We are currently considering whether to participate in the upcoming renewable energy auction in Hungary, which is a contract for difference scheme, very similar to that in Poland. But we are trying to design these projects in such a way that the levelized cost of energy allows us, from these plans, to compete in the commercial market. So we want to make these projects viable, or power plants viable, based on market electricity prices. And we believe that this is feasible, and for us that is an option. We may sign PPAs, but we're trying to find a way, as we did in Australia with Leeton, the 14.6 megawatts, which are also currently under construction and should be also connected in Q4, where we have secured financing for a merchant approach. That means we are selling. So the base case is we're selling into the market, but of course, with the connected power plants, it's always possible to sign PPA agreements for a portion of the produced electricity, or the whole volume for various lengths of time. The important thing is that the financing has been secured on a merchant basis. So we retain full flexibility how to manage and optimize the revenue streams from the power plant. And this is also the model we want to deploy in Hungary, but also in Poland and Romania. Coming just very briefly on the pipeline in Australia. So as mentioned before, we managed to sell our interest in Santa 1 and Canada in Q3 last year. At the point when the grid connection approval had been tabled by the developer, by the transmission system operator, and we also managed to sell our interest in a third project, that is Barongal, to a party different than Canadian Solar. It was a third party, and what we still have is 4 projects under development, and we expect that at least we'll have some guidance on the strategic direction of those projects by the end of this year. In terms of our overall activity, what is worth mentioning is staying in Europe beyond the 14.1 megawatts that we are building in Hungary for our portfolio. We are currently in the middle of construction of a 950 kilowatt peak project in Poland, where we're building a project together with a Polish consortium partner to power a wastewater treatment plant. In Australia, we have Leeton under construction for our portfolio, as mentioned before. We've also been able to win a tender to build a 3 megawatt peak hybrid solar project that is off-grid capable for a wastewater treatment plant in Victoria. This is a technically very challenging project, and for us a great reference to win similar business going forward. So it's not only an interesting project financially, but a very valuable reference. And that project is expected to be commissioned at the end of Q1 next year. The other project that we are in the middle of executing is the hybrid project on Lord Howe Island, where the system is the solar array is 1.2 megawatts, and we're building a 3.2 megawatt battery system, and that is a pure diesel replacement project which should cover about 2/3 of the electricity needs of the island. So 2/3 of the diesel consumption should be replaced by the system. Here we have had some delays linked to the pandemic, as quarantine rules were introduced on the island, so the construction process has been slowed down, not interrupted, but slowed down, as we had less manpower on the island. This has also been covered contractually, and this is covered by the force majeure clause in the contract, so there are no financial penalties from this. Of course, this is a situation that nobody could foresee when we signed an agreement, but we expect to commission the plant before the end of this year, before the tourism season, to the extent that it will happen in Australia, will start. And as has been mentioned before, in Q2 has also been very important for us strategically, as we decided to invest into a minority stake in RAYGEN and to enter into strategic partnership to identify projects across the world, or particularly in areas that have enough direct sunshine, and where also we expect to be the EPC contractor, and wherever it will make commercial sense, we also be the equity investor. And this process is ongoing, and we actually see interesting levels of interest across the world for RAYGEN's technology. Just a very brief snapshot to give a little bit of granularity. We have not changed the euro. So a little bit of granularity on the projects we are building. So this is You can see the location of the leading projects and the general layout. So technically, these are 2 power plants that combined will have 14.6 megawatts of capacity, expected to generate around 28 gigawatt hours of electricity, based on an expected power output of 1,880 kilowatt hours per kilowatt peak, which compared with Central Europe is about 50% above what we have in Hungary, for example. These projects will be built on trackers using bifacial modules, and the revenue model is that we're selling electricity on the market, as mentioned earlier, and in addition, we are generating green certificates, which we'll be able to generate until 2030, that can be sold on the market in Australia and is bought by large energy users and energy generators and large polluters. And prices for these certificates have been going up recently. So we are very confident that the revenue model of our plant is robust, and it's basically a blueprint for what we're trying to do in Europe. So this is just a very brief outlook on overview of the projects in Pushpokládány. So you see the site is located in the east of Hungary, not far from the Hungarian border. Irrigation conditions are slightly above average with respect to Hungary. We are selling electricity based on a contract for difference, where our reference price is 97 euros at this point in time at the current exchange rate. However, that feed-in tariff or this reference rate is indexed, so it will grow with inflation minus 1% over the feed-in tariff or the support period, which for half of the project is 15.4 years, so 15 years and 4 months, and for the other 5 it's 17 years and 9 months. We're also going to use single-axis tracking technology, which of course provides a higher yield, and on half the projects we're using bifacial modules, which provide additional production. Again, we expect to connect by the end of this year, and start generating revenues. And of course, we'll for both Australia and the leading projects and the Pushpokládány projects, we expect to report positive other comprehensive income as the value will exceed our investment costs. So they have a positive net present value. Just a short look at our capital markets situation. So our shares have done very well recently, which I think we can attribute to several factors, some under our control, some not. So I mean, of course, our job is to deliver what we have planned, which I believe we're doing in terms of rolling out additional capacity and expanding our portfolio. Also in terms of entering the market, but of course we have also benefited from the dynamics and the positive perception among the investor base in Poland in relation to the capital, in relation to the photovoltaic sector. So Poland now is the most dynamic, and by now in terms of added capacity, the fastest growing solar market in the CE region, and is also near the top with respect to build out all over Europe. And I think everybody living in Poland cannot escape to notice the hype around solar. What also seemed to have helped our valuation is the fact that we have announced our intention and also followed through with the filing of our securities prospectus move our listing to the main market of the Warsaw Stock Exchange, which will turn us into the first solar energy company on the Polish market, listed on the main market. Of course, there are several other solar companies on NewConnect, just like us at this point, but we'll be the first on the main market. And we do believe that as our activities on the Polish market will become more apparent and grow and become more tangible, that should also help the market perception, investor perception, and hopefully also our valuation. The reason for this move to the main market is, of course, to make our shares more investable for mainly institutional investors, many of whom have limitations to invest into companies listed on NewConnect. And as we also announced, we are planning to list on the open market of the Frankfurt Stock Exchange as a third step. And here, at this point, I can also announce something we actually learned just a few hours ago, and that is that our shares have been admitted to trading on the Munich Stock Exchange because one of basically the most active broker on the Munich Stock Exchange did what is known as an unsponsored listing. So basically, without the knowledge of the issuer, they made a submission, and the Munich Stock Exchange accepted it, and our shares started trading on the Munich Stock Exchange at the end of July. So basically, without our activity, the second objective of this exercise has been fulfilled. Of course, the Frankfurt Stock Exchange has a higher and more perception particularly among international investors. The Munich Stock Exchange, after all, is a regional exchange, but investors have the possibility to trade our shares in euros. So that is a surprising good news. This is public knowledge, so it's just that it was well hidden even to us, but it's an interesting development. With respect to our bond, we recently increased the volume of outstanding bonds to 43 million euros to provide us with more liquidity to continue to complete the construction of our two power plants in Hungary and Australia without having to slow down our project development efforts in the markets that I mentioned earlier. What is important, maybe to reiterate, is that we are both building our Hungarian projects from our own balance sheet and only refinance them with banks for the long term after commissioning. First, we get better terms and save costs, but but the most important thing is that we can execute projects much faster. So we basically, of course, we go to the banks, but we don't have to wait for the approval before we start building. We do both activities in parallel, and it allows us to deploy capacity faster. And of course, once we refinance, the proceeds of the refinancing, we then redeploy into new projects. Coming back to the bond, you can see, despite, well, with the exception of a dip that was relatively short-lived in March, of course, in the context of the initial stages of the pandemic, our bond price has been trading stably above its nominal value, and as you can see from that dip, it also recovered very quickly and has been trading above 100 ever since.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'd like to delve into very, very briefly is an explanation of why we decided to, for the first time, actually enter into the upstream segment, at least through an investment. That means into the provider of a technology, and it is simply because we believe that RAYGEN's technology has some very unique features and are able to solve some of the major problems of the deployment of solar energy globally. Of course, one of the key issues with solar, but of course also other sources, renewable sources like wind, is the intermittency. That means that they produce whenever the sun shines or the wind blows sufficiently strongly. And this is why energy storage is becoming ever more important as the share of renewables, and particularly of those intermittent renewables, is growing in the grid. And what RAYGEN has managed to do is pretty much for the first time to combine concentrated solar, which, as you can see, is based on the concept that a mirror field reflects sunlight into the receiver. That means a focal point. Traditional CSP then captures that heat and transfers the heat into a medium like molten salt or oil, and then stores it in such a medium. RAYGEN's receiver actually combines this approach with photovoltaic. So they have managed to develop a PV cell that can withstand the very high temperatures in that focal point and directly produces electricity. So one mirror field is designed to produce at full sunshine about 1 megawatt of electricity directly through the PV cells, and to capture 2 megawatts of heat, which then is transferred or is then used to heat the water just below the boiling point, so between 90 and 95 degrees Celsius, which is then stored in an insulated tank. And electricity can be, but doesn't have to be, used to chill water to just above the freezing point. So we are talking about 2 to 5 degrees Celsius. Again, in an insulated tank. So the heat losses are absolutely minimal, even over longer periods of time. And then when there is demand for electricity through a so-called organic Rankine cycle engine, the heat difference between both water tanks is used to produce electricity whenever needed. This system can work in an off-grid situation, so it can power potentially a grid, for example, on an island, or it can support the grid around a remote mining site or any other type of remote site. But of course, it also works very well connected to the grid, and it can provide ancillary services to the grid. So basically, spare production capacity, also the ability to draw electricity from the grid when there's too much electricity and prices are, for example, negative. So the electricity can be drawn from the grid and used in the chillers and stored in that way to be redeployed later. So the PV Ultra system and the thermal hydro system together provide for an extremely versatile combination. And what we do see globally is, while batteries are, the use of batteries, of course, is growing exponentially, there is a growing concern about the resource consumption related to the production of batteries. Of course, also the use of various chemicals, which then, particularly at the time of disposal, can become a big problem. So there is a growing interest with a view of sustainability to look for alternatives to batteries, and this is where the thermal hydro system, where the energy storage medium is water, comes in perfectly. And so just today, I mean, this is something that I think we don't have to go through. as this can be found in pretty much all our communications.
We can go to the Q&As.
So I guess you can review that supporting information then at your leisure. So thank you very much for your interest and patience during our presentation, and we will move to answering your questions.
Maybe I can answer the first one related to financing. We have a question about financing, why we emitted bonds at a higher interest rate than credits from banks available. Why we do that? Let me explain you here. The bank financing, you're right, bank financing can be cheaper than our bond coupon is, or is in most cases. That bank finance that we have is cheaper. However, that is non-recourse bank financing on a project level. So basically, the financing is secured by the projects themselves and is within the project itself. This kind of financing is a standardized product. Many banks offer that. And the interest rates, because it is a standardized and low risk financing, the interest rates are relatively low. The bond we have issued on the group level on Photon Energy is for us used, and therefore we are willing to pay higher coupons as a kind of working capital. So with the bond money, we kick off the financing of power plants that we can build them. So we do the upfront investment into the power plant with this money in the course of, so we can fast build and connect the power plant. And once the power plant is connected, we extract again with the bank financing, with long-term cheaper financing, that money to the company. So for this flexibility, we are willing to pay a higher coupon. Therefore, we have this 7.75% coupon on the Euro bond, respectively 6% on the small Czech crown bond that we have issued. I hope that answers this question.
Well, having said that, of course, next time when we tap the bond market, we will strive to reduce that financing cost. And I mean, there's two elements. One is that the general interest rate level has fallen since we issued our last bond. And secondly, it's also a question of track record in the capital market. This bond that is outstanding at the moment is our second bond. On our first bond, we paid an even higher coupon. We were a first-time issuer, so of course there's always a very high level of skepticism. We issued this new bond at the time, well, before the first bond was repayable, and what we could see is that there were a lot of investors basically sitting on the sidelines and waiting to see whether we can repay the first one, because issuing a bond, I mean, it's also very hard work. That we know from our own experience. But you know, if you're good at selling, you may be able to do that. Paying coupons is also something. It's also a hurdle that many companies can take. But actually, repaying a bond is the real litmus test of an issuer. And so with the second bond, we still had to be, price it in such a way that it was still attractive for investors to back us, particularly with respect to the refinancing. The first and also the second bond have a quarterly coupon. So that was done on purpose from the very beginning because we wanted to build up the track record of paying coupons regularly. And I think we have this presence. I mean, this is now already 8 years that we're present on the bond market. And I mean, most of our investors are actually based in Germany or the German-speaking part of Europe. And I think what we've been really able to win a lot of support from well-recognized institutional investors who some of whom bought into our second bond only once we had repaid the first one, but also now in the two increases that we have done last year and this year, they have basically, many of them have come in and topped up their investment. So the bond market is the credit market in general is very much built on trust, on track record, and that I think we have been very successful in building up. And next time when we issue our third bond based on our track record, and unless we face some unexpected situation in capital markets, we believe that we will of course strive to reduce our financing cost. We will also try to maybe raise a slightly bigger bond, which will then again open up a wider investor universe. So there's a clear inflection point at 50 million, and then the next one is at around 100 million. So the investor universe just gets bigger, and that should also have a positive effect on pricing. That was not a guidance on how large our bond will be next time, but now we have 43 outstanding on our current bond, so clearly the first inflection point of 50 is not too far away, and that's where then certain economies of scale should be helpful. Coming back to your second question on water treatment in Poland, this near house water collection is, by the way, something that's also subsidized and has been subsidized in the Czech Republic for quite some time. This is probably not entirely our target market, as it's basically a retail product. And I mean, both in solar and I guess in water, at the moment at least, we are not really planning to target households. But I mean, we do see quite significant potential for water-related products and services. So, for example, one service that we have been developing in the Czech Republic over the last 3 years, and where we see some nice momentum, is, for example, lake management, where we are providing services and products fighting the blue-green algae boom, which with the warming weather and the warmer summers in Europe, but actually worldwide, is becoming a bigger topic. So we are aware that this is also a growing topic in Poland, not only in lakes, but even in the Baltic Sea. So yes, that's an obvious area. There, our customers are typically municipalities or water authorities. Another customer base for us is our water utilities, where, as you could see before, particularly in Australia, but also now in Poland, we are installing solar systems. But of course, we are also providing, so far mainly in the Czech Republic, various services to water utilities, like well remediation, but also various monitoring services, and also water purification applications. So yes, that's something as we expand our activities in Poland, that will not only relate to photovoltaics, but also to our water division, and as well to remediation services.
I can go to the next question then. The next question is about our transition to the main market. As we have announced in beginning of July, our intention to go to the main market, and that we have filed a prospectus with the Dutch financial regulator, AFM. That process is still ongoing, so we are in the process of getting the prospectus approved. We announced already this will take some time. We are progressing there in this process. We assume that this is still going through August into early September. Afterwards, once the prospectus is approved, we will apply for the listing. That will take another short time, some 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. So our expectation is somewhere end of September, October, that we would have the listing on the regulated market in Warsaw running.
Okay, and so I'll take on Piotr's second question. RAYGEN has been, even before our investment, working on their first commercial scale project in Australia, where we are in discussions what our role could be on that project. That's a project that potentially could start next year, but that is not guaranteed. I mean, it is something where they have been talking to other potential partners. With respect to additional projects in Australia or globally, I think that a realistic estimate could be that we may be able to identify a viable product in the next 6 months. But given the lead times then on structuring and financing, I believe a realistic time for a construction start would be 2022. Maybe we're lucky and things happen fast, but I think what is really very encouraging is, as we are now talking to various potential users or partners, we see a very high level of interest, and not only in relation to the application that you have seen on the slide a bit earlier, but I mean, we've now come across certain situations where the heat capture, so we would probably not go for energy storage for later electricity generation, but actually capture the heat for longer periods of time. These hot water storage tanks are actually insulated tanks, have been used in Denmark by some district heating utilities, and we have 2 or 3 situations where this actually could be the way going forward. And actually the heat losses, for example, from summer to winter in Denmark are just a few percentage points. That means you can store that heat from several months with absolute minimum losses. So that could be an application that would be generating the electricity throughout the year, feed it to the grid, and capture the heat for use in a different season. One other area that seems also very promising is to use actually only the PV Ultra part without the storage, and where the heat in particular, but to a lesser extent also the electricity, would be used to power desalination equipment. I think if you Google a little bit, you'll see that the desalination is becoming a very hot topic, not only in the Middle East, where still the largest number of installations or desalination plants is deployed, but now desalination is being used in Australia, in North America, and in many other places in the world. The problem is that the most commonly used desalination technology is reverse osmosis, which is very capital intensive. So when you look at some of the plants in the Middle East, you see a massive desalination plant and a power plant right next to it, because the energy use is so significant, and in many of those power plants, fossil fuels are being burned. So one of the key trends is the search for desalination using renewables, and of course solar energy here makes a lot of sense. And there are other approaches to desalination, which is mainly evaporation. So in other words, we're looking at fine-tuning solutions where we combine PV Ultra and these alternative desalination approaches, and there we see quite significant interest in several parts of the world. So I think at this point in time it's quite difficult to say which would even be the first application. So it may be the traditional one, as you've seen on the slide, or actually in combination with desalination equipment. What is important is this partnership with RAYGEN allows us to to spread our wings geographically, and we're not talking to large energy users as just another PV company, of which by now there are quite a few in the world. But we actually have, it's not exclusive access, but privileged access to this technology, and it's opening a lot of new doors, and again providing, it's raising our profile. As part of that, other opportunities arise, and I think combining solar and water will open a lot more doors in the future.
I think we have to come to an end. However, there's one more question I can see for regarding institutional investors about selling shares. Well, we have announced, I think, so far that we have filed the prospectus to list on the main market. That process does not involve any capital raise, so we are not increasing our capital or intend to sell shares on the market at this stage. Please understand that also we cannot give any more forward-looking statements to any upcoming future activities in the upcoming years, but we are very much financial market oriented. As you know, the company is listed for a very long time already on New Connect. We have the bonds issued on financial markets, and being active on financial markets for financing generally is something we are very open to as a company, I think.
Yes, I think what we can say is that as part of our move to the main market, we will further step up our investors relations efforts, which of course on one hand are directed at all our investors, which of course now to a very large extent are retail investors. This is also the reason why we are now doing quarterly webcasts like today. And I think everybody following us for a longer time knows that we try to provide a lot of information, also now our monthly reports, which are very frequent, so that investors are up to date. But now, again, as we said before, by moving to the main market and having a listing in Frankfurt, we want to become more investable to the institutional investor base. And from our experience and also our approach in capital markets, things don't happen overnight. So it's all about building relationships, being visible, but building relationships, and that's definitely something we're taking very, very seriously. And what that leads to in the future, we will see.
Good. I think if there is,
so I would maybe give another 30 seconds for a
quick last question, if there is any.
If anybody has one. If not, of course, our investors relations department is available at all times. So please feel free to either send us an email or drop us a call, and of course we're happy to answer any questions that may pop up later. Okay, I think there's no.
Otherwise, the next webcast we will do for the next quarter, Q3 results, latest, maybe even before for the listing, that we can do that. So please follow us also in our reporting calendar, and we're happy if you join us next time as well, when we can give you a new updates on our company development.
So thank you very much for your interest and your participation today, and we're looking forward to our next broadcast in 3 months' time, hopefully also with positive news. So
thank you very much,
and wish you a very nice rest of today and a very nice weekend and a sunny one.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.